Well, severe weather season is at its quietest point here through the fall. We take a look at severe weather climatology and how 2023 compares to some other years. So the severe weather outlook the next few days is pretty dull. And that's fairly typical for this time of year. As we head into the fall, things are pretty quiet. We don't have quite a lot of cold air masses yet clashing with hot, humid air masses like we do in the spring. You have the biggest temperature contrast set up. So your severe weather probabilities this time of year, generally across parts of the plains, but pretty low. And you got a little pocket there. This is based on 1982 to 2011 climatology, just a little pocket in Oklahoma. Compare that to June, which is pretty much the peak in the U.S. You have most of the plains, but all the way to the Ohio River Valley, anywhere in that area, high chance of severe storms on any given day in a normal situation. Now, this year has been very unique and very interesting, especially for the northern plains. Look at the lack of storms. Most of the severe weather reports, wind, hail, and tornadoes have been a little further east and south compared to climatological normal. Now compare this to last year, which was a much more typical looking map, at least for the northern plains. You had a lot of wind and tornado reports in Minnesota, the Dakotas, and then spread out through the south as you would expect. But notice the difference, a lot more wind reports too last year for the whole eastern part of the country. So compare this also to 2021, which is another drought year for the northern plains. So we were in a drought this year, but even in 2021, there was substantially more severe weather for the northern plains compared to this year. So it is a really interesting year, especially when we compare it to normal and last year. Now this isn't completely to scale, but this is looking at basically the distribution by months of the severe weather. It was a much more spread out, much more normal looking season last year compared to this year, where we had that lull because of the northern plains drought in May and June. And then it was spread out more though in the eastern part of the country here through much of the summer months. So believe it or not, this year is actually ahead of last year. If you're living in the northern plains, you're thinking, what? Because it has been so quiet for severe weather. We have that dip where we were temporarily below normal back in May and June, but then otherwise we've been mostly above normal and mostly ahead of 2022. And then that's compared to that solid black line, which is the normal. So again, this year pretty quiet in the north, more severe weather in the east and south. This might be an example of what we can expect in the future. I've talked a little bit about climate change trends and severe weather. That tornado alley is shifting a little bit more south and east and more into the nighttime hours.